Hi, it's Grandma back again, and this time I'm going to read a book called Dr. DeSoto. You can see on the front what the picture looks like and see what kind of a doctor he was. A dentist, right? A dentist that's a mouse. And this book was written by William Steig. This was a book my children enjoyed when they were little. Dr. DeSoto. Dr. DeSoto, the dentist, did very good work. So he had no end of patients. That means animals were always coming to him to see him. Those close to his own size, like moles, chipmunks, that kind of small animal, sat in the regular dentist chair. Larger animals had to sit on the floor while Dr. DeSoto stood on a ladder. And I'll show you the picture. Here's the little chair for small animals to sit in, because then he could reach them okay, because he was closer to their size. But if some animal like a pig or some other big animal came in, there's her little purse, he would climb up the ladder and work away. What do you think that is? You're going to find out in just a minute. For extra large animals, he had a special room. There, Dr. DeSoto was hoisted up to the patient's mouth by his assistant, who also happened to be his wife. So this is a clever picture. Here is apparently a horse or a donkey with his mouth open, and here's Dr. DeSoto, and you can see that in the waiting room here, they have some kind of a pulley system worked out where she can crank him up with this and get him up all the way and then lower him down to the animal's mouth. There's another hook that's hanging there on the pulley, and I believe you'll see later what that's for. It's for it can be used for pulling teeth. Okay, so he sounds like a pretty clever mouse, he and his wife too. Dr. DeSoto was especially popular with the big animals. He was able to work inside their mouths wearing rubbers, that's like boots, to keep his feet dry. And his fingers were so delicate and his drills so dainty that they could hardly feel any pain. And of course, everything was small and dainty because he was small and dainty, right? And he was a good dentist. So there he is. He dropped off the pulley system and he's climbed into this cow's mouth and he's working away. Okay. Being a mouse, he refused to treat animals dangerous to mice. And it said so on his sign. Here's a picture of his sign. Can you read that? First it says Dr. DeSoto, dentist. Then it says cats and other dangerous animals not accepted for treatment. When the doorbell rang, he and his wife would look out the window, and they wouldn't admit even the most timid-looking cat. So here they are, peeking out the window. Whenever someone would ring the doorbell, they could see down below to the street. And even if a cat looked shy and friendly nope, they wouldn't take it. Because cats can be dangerous. What do cats like to eat? Right, mice. Well, one day, when they looked out, they saw a well-dressed fox with a flannel bandage around his jaw. What do you think about a fox? I cannot treat you, sir, they yelled down to him. Here's the fox with his bandage. Look at all the animals on their bikes and cars and walking. It's a cute little dog baby and the mother. So Dr. DeSoto said, I cannot treat you, sir, he shouted down to the street. Sir, haven't you read my sign? Please, the fox wailed. Have mercy, I'm suffering. And he had tears flowing down his face. He wept so bitterly it was pitiful to see. Look at him. The other animals are looking at him. He looks miserable, doesn't he? Well, just a moment, said Dr. DeSoto. And so then he and his wife are here. They're talking it over. What should we do? Is it worth the risk? That poor fox, he whispered to his wife. What shall we do? She said, let's risk it. And she pressed the buzzer and let the fox in. Well, he was up the stairs in a flash, and he got on his knees in front of them and said, bless your little hearts, he cried, falling to his knees. I beg you, do something. The tooth is killing me. Oh, there he is, pleading for help. So Dr. DeSoto went to the sink and cleaned up, and he said, sit on the floor, sir, said Dr. DeSoto, and remove the bandage, please, because he had that flannel-like wrap around his head. So here he is, being a good dentist and making sure his hands are clean before he starts his procedure. Dr. DeSoto climbed up the ladder and bravely entered the fox's mouth. Ow, he gasped. The fox had a rotten bicuspid. That's a tooth that's farther back a little bit. An unusually bad breath. I'll show you the picture. If you can see, all his teeth look pretty white, but there's one that's kind of brown. That one has gotten rotten. Doesn't look very good. And you can imagine if he's in that mouth and the guy has unusually bad breath, that would be pretty stinky, wouldn't it? Well, Dr. DeSoto said, this tooth will have to come out. But we can make you a new one. Just stop the pain, whimpered the fox, wiping some more tears away. Despite his misery, he realized he had a tasty little morsel in his mouth. And his jaw began to quiver. Keep open, yelled Dr. DeSoto. Wide open, yelled his wife. So, even though he was in pain, he was miserable, he needed their help, he was having second thoughts about, because they looked yummy. Well, Dr. DeSoto said, I'm going to give you gas now. You won't feel a thing when I yank that tooth. It's a special medicine to help take the pain away. Soon, the fox had gotten sleepy from it. Yummy, he mumbled. How I love them raw. He's talking in his sleep. With just a pinch of salt and a dry white wine. Well, here he is getting him special medicine to put him to sleep. And the fox is mumbling in his sleep about eating them. So they could guess from those words that he just said that what he was dreaming about. And Mrs. DeSoto handed her husband a pole to keep the fox's mouth open. That was a good idea, wasn't it? That propped it open so that even in his sleepiness, he wouldn't forget what he was doing and eat them. We don't want that. Well, Dr. DeSoto fastened his extractor to the bad tooth. It's like a clamp on it. And then he and his wife began turning the winch. That's the crank that works the pulley. I'll show you the picture in just a second. Well, why don't we look at it now so you get a better picture. Here he is. His mouth propped open, and they have this pulley, the rope, it's attached, this clamp is attached to his bad tooth, and they crank and crank and crank, and it pulls the tooth right out. Pop! Here it is. Finally, with a sucking sound, the tooth popped out and hung swaying in the air, just like you see here. Oh, yeah, bleeding, the fox yelped when he woke up. Dr. DeSoto ran up the ladder and stuffed some gauze in the hole where his tooth had been. The worst is over, he said. I'll have your new tooth ready tomorrow. Be here at 11 sharp. The fox, still a little woozy from the whole treatment, said goodbye and left. And on his way home, he wondered if it would be shabby of him to eat the DeSotos when the job was done. He's kind of debating it, like, oh, he's feeling better, but he's kind of thinking, I'm not quite sure about this. Well, after office hours, Mrs. DeSoto molded a tooth of pure gold and polished it. Here she is. She has a special polishing machine, and she molded the tooth first, and then she's polishing it on this machine. It's like a wheel going around. And Dr. DeSoto was talking to her, and he says, "Raw with salt indeed," muttered Dr. DeSoto. "How foolish to trust a fox." "Well, he didn't know what he was saying," said Mrs. DeSoto. "Why should he harm us? We're helping him." "Because he's a fox," said Dr. DeSoto. "They're wicked, wicked creatures." Well, that night, the DeSotos lay awake worrying. "Should we let him in tomorrow?" said Mrs. DeSoto. Here they are laying in bed talking and wondering what to do. And they can't get to sleep. Well, Dr. DeSoto said, "Once I start a job, I finish it." He said that very firmly. He said, "My father was the same way. They don't want to take the tooth and then not give him the new tooth. They want to finish the job, or he does. But we must do something to protect ourselves," said his wife. So they talked and they talked until they formed a plan. "I think it'll work," said Dr. DeSoto. And a minute later, he was asleep and snoring. The next morning, promptly at 11, a very cheerful fox turned up. He was feeling not a particle of pain. Look at him. He looks so much better. He's recovered from the treatment, and his bad tooth is gone. It looks very, very happy, doesn't he? When Dr. DeSoto got into his mouth, he snapped it shut for a moment. Then he opened it wide and laughed. "Just a joke," he chortled. "Be serious," said the dentist sharply. "We have work to do." His wife was lugging the heavy tooth up the ladder. Now, the tooth for a fox is not gigantic, but it's definitely bigger than a mouse. So it was a heavy tooth to lug up the ladder. So Dr. DeSoto was going to put the new tooth in. "Oh, I love it," exclaimed the fox. "It's just beautiful." Dr. DeSoto set the gold tooth in its socket and hooked it up to the teeth on both sides. The fox caressed the new tooth with his tongue. That feels good. It feels so good, he thought. I really shouldn't eat them. On the other hand, how can I resist? This is what the fox was thinking when the DeSotos were standing there and he was licking his new tooth. And just then, Dr. DeSoto said, "We're not finished." Holding up a large jug, he said, "I have here a remarkable preparation, developed only recently by my wife and me. With just one application, you can be rid of toothaches forever. How would you like to be the first one to receive this unique treatment?" So here they are on the ladder, holding the jug and explaining. The fox is like, that sounds interesting. And the fox said, "I certainly would. I'd be honored to try this." He hated any kind of personal pain. "You will never have to see us again," said Dr. DeSoto. And the fox thought to himself, "No one will see you again." "No one," said the fox to himself. He had definitely made up his mind to eat them with the help of his brand new tooth. Yikes. So there he is smiling as they get everything ready. Well, Dr. DeSoto stepped into the fox's mouth with a bucket of secret formula and proceeded to paint each tooth. He hummed as he worked, and Mrs. DeSoto stood by on the ladder, pointing out spots that he'd missed. There's a little bit there, a little bit there on the bottom. See, you can see she's pointing, and Dr. DeSoto's working, and the fox is being very cooperative because he thinks it would be great to never have pain again, and he wants to try this wonderful formula. When the dentist was done, he stepped out. "Now, close your jaws tight," he said, "and keep them closed for a full minute. Keep them tight." So he did. He did exactly what he was told, and then he tried to open his mouth. But his teeth were stuck together. Here's the picture. Here's Dr. DeSoto saying, close your mouth and hold it there for a minute. Oh, when he couldn't open his mouth, Dr. DeSoto said, oh, I forgot to tell you. Excuse me. I should have mentioned that you won't be able to open your mouth for a day or two. The secret formula must first permeate the dentine. That's part of the tooth. But don't worry. No pain ever again. The fox was stunned. He stared at Dr. DeSoto and then at his wife, and then they smiled and waited. Here he is like, you can't open his mouth. And they're smiling and waiting. And all he could say was, thank you very much. You know what that was? Thank you very much. But he couldn't open his mouth. So it was like, thank you very much. Through his clenched teeth. Can you try that? Try to say it with your mouth shut. Thank you very much. Well, he finished that, and then he got up to leave. He tried to do it with dignity, because he was a little bit taken aback by what was happening. And then he stumbled down the stairs in a daze. What had they done? Do you know what they did? They must have put some kind of glue in there to make his mouth stay shut so that he couldn't what? Right. So he would not be able to eat them at all. And I don't know how long that glue was going to stay like that. But they said you won't ever have tooth pain again because he couldn't open his mouth. So this fox is walking out kind of in a daze down the stairs. Looks a little concerned, does he? At the top of the stairs, there's Dr. DeSoto and his wife. And they looked at each other and they realized that they had outfoxed the fox. They kissed each other and they took the rest of the day off. And that's the end. Just the picture I showed you. That's the end of Dr. DeSoto by William Steig. I hope you enjoyed it. See you soon.